Hello, my quilting friends. My name is Leah Day, and welcome to the Friendship Quilt Along. Today, I'm quilting my square in a square surprise block, and I've decided to stitch it with some big giant stippling and a straight line spiral in the center that I'm knocking out with my new ditcher ruler. This ruler is not only for stitching in the ditch, you can also use it to space out nice wide lines and keep them straight and square on your quilt block. So let's get started learning more about quilting stippling and long arm quilting with rulers too. So here I am on our square in a square surprise block, and I'm just getting started, so I'm running a little on the cold side. So I'm starting out very slowly, and I'm just going to wiggle around with a nice all over stipple, nice really big scale here, and I'm working my way around this border. Now what I want to avoid, I don't want to get into the center of the block. I just want to quilt this super scrappy border and into the background. So just a few tips here. It's just, even though, if you're on a long arm, you can move really fast. I'm going to encourage you to not do that. I'm going to encourage you to go slow and steady. Make careful movements with your hands, because when you race it and you push really fast, that's when you don't give yourself time to really think about the design. And stippling is one of those designs that, yes, it does require some thought. So like right here, I'm thinking about swinging out and maybe hooking down. That looks nice. And then I've got a lot of choices here. I could simply swing back and then go up and around, or I could kind of come out, kind of make almost a wishbone shape. I kind of like that idea, so that's what I'm going to do. So as I'm quilting, this is kind of like reading ahead. When you're reading out loud, you're kind of quilting ahead in your mind. You're looking at the quilt thinking, okay, how am I going to stitch through that area? Well, I'm going to come in with a nice curve just like that, and then I could swing back, or I can just go in ahead and elongate that curve and go in that direction too. I'm also thinking about the scale that I'm quilting on. So the scale is the distance between these lines of quilting. And it's actually easier to quilt nice and big and open like this on a long arm, because I'm moving the machine over the quilt. And it's kind of a little bit more like drawing with a pencil on paper. This is a little harder whenever you're quilting on a home sewing machine and you're pushing the quilt under the needle. In that situation, it's actually easier to stitch smaller. So I'm going to come over here and click it off. I want to explain scale really quick. Scale is the distance between these lines. So roughly I'm quilting on about an inch scale. There's about an inch between these lines. And that's really what I want to keep nice and consistent throughout this block. So now I'm going to pop in, swing out. You can see I'm maintaining that scale. And this is the nice thing, is I don't have to come in real close. I can stitch down along this edge in the batting area and then swing in whenever it feels right. So I think I want to come down just a little bit further. In fact, actually, let's come down really far, and I show you a really cool technique, and that is, swing in down here and then swirl up. I think that looks more interesting, and that ended up filling up that space really nicely. I like that. So a couple shapes that I like with stippling, kind of just like a wiggle back and forth. That's what I'm doing right here. It's just a wiggly U shape basically. And now I'm going to double back. Notice that I quilted the inside of the block there, the part closer to the inside, and then I swung out and came closer to my border. And I did that for two reasons. Number one, I don't want to get stuck. So if I kind of quilt this section first and then I quilt to the inside, I could get stuck there and kind of stuck in a pocket and I have to break thread. Not a big deal, but I try not to get stuck in the block if I can help it. And then I also, I think that works better because it avoids pleats in the inside of the quilt if I stitch and secure the inside part first and then the outside. Now, of course, that would make more sense if I'd actually done the quilting in the inner part of the block first. But I'm honestly still trying to figure out make up my mind and figure out how I want to quilt this one. And so I'm still trying to decide what design I think will look really good there. Now I'm stitching up and down along that edge just to secure it. And this is also doing double duty. It's also helping me see how far down I can quilt before I have to advance. And I'm actually going to stitch off the block again for that exact same reason, because I don't want to secure the block and end up with pleats if it starts to shift and move from the center. So here we go. I'm going to come back in, and that's where I'm going to come in and swirl in and then get to the center of that block. Not the center, sorry, the center of the border, the closest part of the border to the block. There we go. Now I've sped up a little bit, and my stitching is getting just ever so slightly sloppy, so let me be more careful. 2 hands on the handlebars, and then here's where the kind of the limit of my frame, so I want to be really careful not to push that, because if I try and stitch down further than my frame allows, then I'll end up with a straight line in my stippling. That won't look so good. Okay, so now I'm just going to stitch right down, secure that edge nicely, and that is done. Okay, so I'm going to swing back around and fill in this border over here just the exact same way. Now I'm going to think about what I want to stitch in the center of this block, and because I've knocked out this whole section of the border, what's cool is I can go on ahead and advance the quilt slightly, so that way I can pretty much do the entire rest of the block all in one go. So I think that's what I'm going to do next. Now I have decided on a pretty cool design for the inside of the block. I'm going to do a square spiral working my way inside, and I am using one of my new rulers. This is the Ditcher ruler, but you can do a whole lot more than just ditching with this ruler. What's really cool about it is that it's going to help you do things like spacing out your foot a set distance away from a ditch and stitching nice straight lines. And that is exactly what I'm going to be using it for. So right now I'm just getting placement, and I'm going to drop my needle down, and I'm about 3/4 of an inch from those ditches. So if you're using a walking foot or free motion quilting on your home sewing machine, then that's what you're going to want to do, is just simply start out marking a square all the way around the inside of your block that is 3/4 of an inch away from the ditch. Okay, so I'm lining this up, and all I'm doing here is I'm lining up the Ditcher ruler. I'm lining up the line that is 2 from the edge, where I have the 1/4 inch lines marked. Now I've got another side here that has 1/8 inch lines etched, and that's going to give you a very different spacing. I really wanted to play around with spacing a little bit, see if we could start playing with some 1/8 inch spacing on our lines, and it is working really, really great. So this is a super cool ruler for allowing you to space out lines nicely without having to mark it on your quilt. So like right now I'm coming down, here's my pocket, this is where I'm going to end. I'm going to make sure that this line that is etched on the ruler is going to be lined up with that ditch. So I'm going to come in nice and straight and square, click it off, come around, and then now I'm going to start here and stitch over. So I'm going to go all the way around this block with a square that is exactly 3/4 of an inch from the ditch. That's going to be the first step. And then I'm going to use this ruler to space inside and do a square spiral inside. I think that's going to be really cool. And what's nice is this is kind of playing off the square shapes that we have in the piecing. So I think this is working piecing wise and design wise really well too. Now coming up here on this corner, I'm just making sure that line 1 from the edge is right there lined up. That's going to give me that 3/4 inch spacing as I nest into that pocket. And that's one of the special things about this ruler, is I created these nested pockets, so that way it's going to hold the ruler in place really nicely. Okay, so this is kind of a tricky placement. I've got to have my hand here on the outside, at least for a little while, lining up with that ditch, and then I'm also making sure that the ruler's not going to lip up. So kind of keeping everything in place all at the same time. As soon as you get out of an awkward situation, though, go on ahead and creep your hand up, so that way you don't leave your hand in a contorted position or anything like that for any length of time. I'm going to slide the ruler up. I think it'll actually be better about right there. That looks good. And all this is just lining up a line on the ruler with a ditch, with something that you can clearly see. If you didn't have ditches, let's say you were in the middle of a border and you wanted to do something like this and you didn't have anything to play off of, well, then you could just mark a line and that would be a-okay too. So you can use marked lines, you can do other lines that you have stitched nice and straight, and you can use ditches, anything to line up with this ruler. Now here's a tricky spot. I don't really have enough space here. Well, I think if I can hook it around really carefully, I advanced the quilt just a little bit, and so it's a little bit bulky here, but if I'm really careful, I think I can slip this in and stay nice and straight across. There we go. That is looking great. Slide it down carefully. The main goal with this ditching ruler was to create something that would really help us stitch in the ditch just absolutely perfectly. That's absolutely my goal. But it's also to be able to do lines that have wider spacing apart. I found that that was a real struggle. And I'm going to show you exactly how this is going to work, because I don't want this to be a super tight spiral. I want it to be a nice open spiral. So I'm going to move this over and let's take a look. If I line up with the center line on the ruler, well, that is going to give me, there's an inch, and then there's another inch if I'm going all the way to the outside edge of the ruler. So let's go even further. Right here, this is going to give me from here, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that is right now a 2-inch spacing. If I go with the line that is basically the second 1/8 inch spacing line here, you can always just count the lines, count the 1/4 inches, add up, and also the 1/8 inches, and you can add that up and it's going to work out just fine. So I'm just lining that up with the previous stitching line. So it's wide enough that I can do that. I love this. And now I can come straight down. So now I can do much wider spacing. I can go upwards. It looks like, yeah, I could do 3-inch spaced lines with this ruler if I'm lining up over here with a ditch and over here with the edge of the foot. Because remember, you also have an extra 1/4 inch on the foot itself. So this is a lot of math for quilting, for machine quilting, I should definitely say. But I'm going to be sharing more about this ruler, more fun things that you can do. So please don't worry if you're feeling just a little bit overwhelmed or confused. No worries. And if you are marking this on your quilt and you're wanting to follow along, then what you want to do is start out by marking 3/4 of an inch from the edge, and then as you come and bring your spiral inside, then you are measuring 2 inches apart, lines that are 2 inches apart. So let's see if I've come down far enough, and no, I have not. So I need to stitch down another 1/4 of an inch. Really easy to see that with this ruler. I love this. Just a little bit of stitching down. Now rotate it around. This is looking great. So I'm just lining up that line. So I've got an 1/8 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch, that line right there. That's what I'm lining up with my previous stitching line. And if ever you've undershot it, with your ruler foot, just kind of set it up and get the ruler in the right position and then just pull the machine towards yourself. That works great. Now, hand placement on any ruler is really important. You can see I'm spreading my fingers out nice and wide, and I'm hooking my thumb here right on the back side of that ruler. So that way I have good control over it, and I'm actively pushing it against the foot. So that way I know that it is the foot and the ruler are staying together. That is the most important thing. And particularly for long arm quilting, this can be a little tricky because it's easy enough to just go wiggle off in any direction and not keep the foot and the ruler tight together. So here's, I think, a good advantage of this ruler. You can see I can just grip these 2 little hangy things on the ends. Kind of another thing that I designed there, so that way I can grip left-handed in this position without having to hold the ruler in a really awkward way. Now, as you can see, the needle is getting close to my fingers, so I am being very careful to make sure that that's not going to come anywhere near to stitching into me. Very, very careful, very mindful always. All right. So one thing I did not make the ruler very cluttered with lots of horizontal lines. I wanted to avoid that. So as you can see, I overshot this a little bit. I'm going to be 1/4 of an inch off from what I had before. And that's okay. I don't think that's a deal breaker. You know, when occasionally, you know, and the other lines I seem to undershoot, and then this one I seem to overshoot. So I don't think that's a deal breaker. I don't think that's a problem. I don't think you're going to be able to see that in my quilt. Now, slipping like I just did, you probably will be able to notice that. I did a little blip right there. That's okay. Just keep on quilting. You know, this is the thing I think is most important, is just to keep on going and not feel like you have to stop and rip out every teensy tiny little mistake. All right, so this is going to speed up rapidly because when you're quilting on a 2-inch scale, that means that you don't actually have to do that much quilting. You can see now I'm already coming in this direction. Need to be careful. I'm basically just visualizing where I think that direction change is, because like I said, I decided not to clutter up the ruler too much with too many horizontal lines, and that means that it's a little bit more of a guesswork when you're going in that direction, when you want to do a pivot and a direction change, but I think that actually is a-okay. There we go. This is looking good. I am so excited. I'm going to come over again, just kind of visualize where you think that direction change comes in, and then check yourself. Line up the ruler. If you've undershot it, yay, because then you can always stitch further down. And if you've overshot it, no big deal. No big deal at all. What's neat about this, and this is just a magic of spacing, guys, it's, you know, it's kind of kismet. It's not really something that you can plan, but I love how this is coming in to frame these seams, and that's roughly about 1/4 of an inch away on both of those seams. It's not exact, but it's close enough, and I like that. I like it whenever things just end up magically lining up in kind of an unexpected way. Now we're going to go this way, and I think I'm nearly there. I think just one more line going in this direction. Let's see here. Might want to just go on ahead and line that up with that seam. So I'm lining up the edge line on the ruler, one with that seam, coming down, and then maybe to kind of dress this up just a little bit, just to make it look really intentional, I'm just going to echo ditch just this one little center square. I think that'll look really cool. So here, echo ditching. Well, it's about 1/2 of an inch stitching away from the ditches. I'm lining up with the line that is one edge line from the edge, and I'm just going to go to there and stop. There we go. We have our center stitched with a square spiral. So that's it for this video. I hope you learned a lot about stippling and ruler quilting with me. If you'd like to check out my new rulers, I've just put together a new set. You can find it at leahday.com/ruler2. It's my second set of rulers. You get not only the ditcher, you also get a 2-inch feather and a 2-inch circle. So come and check them out at leahday.com/ruler2. Until next time, let's go quilt.